anybody that's enjoying their morning commute to work here on Asheville, you're welcome for causing just a little delay. Dad was driving it and getting on 240 here in Asheville, and the right front tire just locked up, brakes locked up. Don't know what's going on. Hey, thanks buddy, appreciate you. Before we get into letting you guys know what we found on everything, I wanted to give a quick shout out to everybody that stopped and helped us out when the truck did break down there on 240. We had a sheriff's deputy, a Buncombe County Sheriff's deputy, some of the fire EMS guys stop and check on us, make sure everything was good. We had a trooper, Wilson, state trooper, NC State Trooper Wilson. Didn't get his first name, unfortunately, but his last name was Wilson. Super good guy. He stopped and got a lane blocked off of us, kind of kept some of the crazies from running into the back of everything. So we want to thank them for stopping and helping us out. And also give a quick shout out to James. James is the guy with the tow truck that came and got us. He got us home. He dealt with it, getting it on, which was a pain, and getting it back off, which is also kind of a pain. And give me a call afterwards and said that he had actually followed us on YouTube before that. He didn't realize exactly who we were initially, but give me a call afterwards, and that was super cool to hear him, for him to even give us a call back. So going to give a shout out to James. Thanks for coming and getting us, man, and thanks for everybody that stopped. All right, let's get to what we found. Well, that was pretty crazy. Got the truck back home now, got it in here, kind of starting to figure out what the heck happened. Dad said when he pulled up on the 240, touched the brakes, and it just locked up. We got it here, and still not 100% sure exactly what started this deal, but you can see it's right here was sheared off. If we get in here and look at it and kind of see how this whole assembly goes together, you guys have seen this before, of course. But this brake caliper bracket right here gets mounted to the spindle, and it goes here, and then it mounts again on the bottom, wherever. It mounts on the bottom and up here, and this bolt was actually sheared off, this one here, and the brake caliper, when we got it in here, the brake caliper was actually completely off, laying against the wheel, because we had to get it in and everything else. You can see we got a pretty healthy gouge in the wheel here. It has pretty much mutilated the rotors. So yeah, so the whole thing is just kind of weird to us. We don't know exactly what happened. Like, there's the one bolt goes here, one bolt here, and that bracket goes on.
Bolt either sheared or I'll let the bolts loose.
Basically like this. And so either somehow the bolt sheared, there shouldn't have really been that much pressure on it, or potentially we left that bolt loose. Anything's possible. We went over this thing multiple times kind of trying to check it, but so we're still kind of a little dumbfounded at kind of what went on, but we do at least know kind of what happened. That brake caliper actually, the bolt actually failed, somehow loose or sheared, and the caliper literally fell off of it. So no wonder it wouldn't turn. So we're gonna do a little more investigation here and see what the heck's going on. Well, we've looked into it some more, and we still haven't 100% figured out what happened. We think what happened is the bolt that goes here on the spindle was left loose or something, and it's backed out, and that fell out. And when it fell out, this one, it got everything in a bind, and it caused this right here, this bolt here, to shear, which I think I showed you guys that earlier, but it's laying here, so it sheared that right there. And you can see that that goes into this bracket right there. This goes through the spindle and into that bracket, and that's what sheared. We were driving this thing the other day, and when we were driving it, we heard something. We hit a bridge joint. We heard something. We thought it was one of the running board bolts that fell out because they weren't really attached super well. They were attached good enough, but not well, apparently. So we thought that had happened. Listened to it. Really no signs of it. Yesterday, we pulled it into the shop, and the right front would kind of lock up. It was like it not locking up. It was like it was grabbing, like the caliper was grabbing, and us just not taking the time to jack it up and look at it. We think that was probably, it was already showing signs last night, and we didn't take the precaution to fix it. Do that, you know. Hey, if there's a lesson to be learned here, if there's something that's happening that you realize is happening, make sure you just take a few extra minutes, couple hours, and check it. That'll save you from having to call AAA and get them to tow you home. Yeah, so we're working on kind of figuring out what all we need here. There was a spacer that went between the spindle and the bracket. Dad's making a new one of those that fell out whenever the bolt fell out. So yeah, just kind of making a plan here. Looks like we don't really trust the caliper anymore, just in case. The brake line was pinched when we at some point in all this, so that got pinched, so we'll have to make a new brake line. We need a new caliper because there's a pretty healthy gouge in this one. We don't want to reuse that. And the pads, you can see that those are also ruined. So yeah, but really kind of now that we're seeing all this, it probably could have been a lot worse. So this is pretty minor stuff to have to kind of take care of. It could have been a lot worse, and I guess it happened in it wasn't a great location, but at least it wasn't at high speeds, you know, going down the interstate or something like that. So, but we're gathering up what we need and kind of figuring that out. All right, we've kind of got a game plan together. Mom and Dad are on their way to Asheville. They found a place up there that we believe has the brass fittings. They call them olives that go inside these air-equipped fittings. They think we finally found some of those. We're trying to get this thing put back together because we're supposed to be heading over to Matt's tomorrow evening to go ahead and get him to tune this thing. So we're trying to get this thing put back together so that we don't have to cancel our appointment there. We already had to cancel the one this morning, so we're trying to kind of not have to deal with that. The other part of this is that these brake rotors that come with this Heights kit, these are a custom brake rotor. They're actually Granada brake rotors that they have fixed specifically to fit GM bearings. So, of course, Napa Store didn't have any of them. So what we're going to do for this is basically I'm going to take this air sander with this like 80 grit sanding pad on it, and I'm just going to kind of scuff this up. If you feel this, when we first looked at it, we were looking at it with as all bad, but it's actually not really gouged. It's just kind of hazed the surface of it. So we'll take this, scuff it up, make sure there's no high spots on it, get that cleaned back up. We'll probably get another one ordered at some point, but just to get us through for now, we're going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of this put back together. We're going to change the brake pads on both sides because we had a whole set of brake pads up at the Napa Store. So we're going to get those put on. I'm going to put in new brake pads. We're going to take the bolts out of those brackets that hold the calipers on, and they are getting Loctited. So hopefully this doesn't happen again. So once I do this, I'll go ahead and get everything put back together, and then Dad should hopefully either be back or I might already be gone by then, and he's going to go ahead and get the brake line put back together, and we should have this thing back operational today, which would be awesome. one other thing that happened, well, a couple other things that happened whenever this whole fiasco kicked off. First off, when the caliper came loose, when the first bolt came out and the second bolt broke, it tells you a whole lot about the line. This bracket back here that we have holding the solid brake line in the frame there, the line came loose, the caliper came loose and it pulled the line, and it pulled that line so hard that it actually pulled that bracket that was welded to the frame. It pulled it out some. So that tells you just how strong that stainless braided line was. So a little experiment on it that wasn't intentional, but it really shows you how strong that stuff is, which is pretty crazy. But it also bent these slider bolts. So went over to Napa. These are GM metric brake calipers. So if you're ever working on this height stuff or anything like that, you can go to the Napa store and get a GM metric brake caliper, and any of the slides and the pads and everything they have there will work with this caliper setup. So I went ahead and got the rotor put back on, the calipers back on, everything's ready. All we need is that brake line that Dad's going to get now, or the olives, the brass fittings that we need to go inside of those fittings, and then he can put that brake line back on. This side will be back functional. I'm going to go over there to that side now and pull out the bolts that are holding that caliper bracket to the spindle and get those Loctited up also. But this side is back ready to go. Took some micro thinner, cleaned the brake rotor on both sides. I left the cotter pin undone because I always like to get that. Should double check that preload on those, make sure that it's spinning how he wants them to. We can bend that back into place and then put the cap back on, the dust cap back on. But I'm going to run to the other side now and get those bolts Loctited up so this doesn't happen over there either. Well, yesterday was kind of a mad thrash to try and get this thing put back together so we can still get it to Matt's. But got to looking at it a little bit more, and kind of realized more had happened than we initially realized. So we got everything put back together, got the rotor put back in place, all that stuff, and then got to looking at it, and if you can see this here, this should not have this or this in it. So me and Dad were just talking about was kind of when that caliper got wedged between the wheel and the rotor, it just kind of the whole right front assembly was trying to rotate, and it definitely got this upper control arm mounting, and if you look at it, it actually bent the upper control arm itself. So we had the paint kind of as witness lines here. You can see where that has bent here, and if you look back here, you can kind of see a little bit also. But the big thing is right there, and this whole assembly has been beaten up pretty good here. So just kind of puts everything on pause. We got to order some stuff from Heights to get this stuff replaced, and while this truck is up, we're going to pull the wheels and tires off of it, and we're basically going to nut and bolt every single nut and bolt on this thing, just make sure that everything is good, just to kind of prevent this a little bit more. If you go back and watch the last video, actually we say that we just didn't get to it before something actually broke. But we'll get this thing put back together, order some parts, go over everything, and then we can kind of get back in line with the plan of what we had lined up for this truck. One thing that we've talked about doing to this thing, since we're kind of down, we're waiting on parts, we're kind of trying to tidy up some of the little stuff. I've been looking at kind of the windshield wiper stuff and things inside the cab, but one of the big things is this truck gets really hot inside of it. And there's just kind of there's always a little bit of flow from the heater, or in the heater. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a ball valve in line with the heater hoses, and you can see that right here. Basically what the plan is we'll cut that in 2 spots there, and then we'll put this ball valve in line, and we can take that ball valve, turn it off, turn it on. That'll keep the heater flow, it'll keep the hot water flowing from the engine to the heater core, and that'll keep any hot water from flowing into the heater core, and should help cool off the engine some, so or cool off the inside of the cabs quite a bit. So we are working on that now. We want to go ahead and get this put in place, and then that'll be at least one little thing that'll be a little bit, hopefully a little better when we're riding in this truck once we get it put back together. All right, well, it's in. That was went a little smoother than we probably expected it to. You saw Dad just took some clamps, put on each side of this hose to keep the flow from coming. So when we cut it, there was the initial just a little bit of pressure of what was right here, and that was it. We didn't really make a mess, which is, you know, we didn't really expect that. We kind of expected there to be a mess. But anyway, so we got that in there now. We're going to leave it open and let it run open for a while once we get this thing back going. And then, like I said, that'll definitely keep this thing some cooler inside. There's a lot more that we can do with some Dynamat and things like that that'll help with that a bunch. So that's probably what we'll work on next, but probably just going to kind of call it a day around here, to be honest. So we'll wait on some parts to get here and go from there.
Okay, we're back working on this 55 Chevrolet truck. I think by now Jake's probably put up the fiasco that went on as we tried to take this to town the other day. What it amounted to, the caliper and the caliper mounting bracket on the right side front came loose and rotated up, hit the upper control arm and locked the front brake up in pretty heavy traffic. And that's a pretty humbling experience if you do that, if you get into a situation like that. First of all, I want you to know, I want to make this real plain, that it was not a parts failure, it was human error, me being the human that erred. There's two bolts that holds that caliper mounting bracket onto the spindle. One is from front to rear, it's a 1/2 13. One's from side to side, which is a 7/16. I believe, from what we've seen, that I left that 7/16 bolt loose. It fell out, taking with it a 3/4 inch long, 7/8 inch diameter spacer with it. Well, that left the upper bolt holding the calipers as you applied the brakes. Well, it held for a while, and then it broke. And when it broke, the wheels came off, literally. So anyway, that we got all that figured out. I think that's what caused that. So what we got into now, we're going to try to get everything lined back up. And I think in an earlier episode we talked a little bit about rear end and front end alignment. I can take this opportunity, since I screwed up, to show you kind of how I do this kind of a Reader's Digest version of it. We start right back here in the rear, and I set this fixture up. I guess you call it a fixture. It's just a straight edge, and I reference off the wheel. I've got it pretty close to the tire, but I actually take my measurements off the wheel rim, and then I lay this laser indicator on the straight edge and project the light to the front. So I know that I'm square on the rear end. I know the rear end, we're going to have the front end lined up directly in line with the rear end. So I project the laser toward the front of the truck. And then you can do this with a string. I've done it with a string. String works just fine. Laser's just a little easier you don't have to worry about tripping over the line. And you can go, I put another straight edge here on the front rotor, and I've already got this squared up, but I've just got an angle straight edge on the front rotor, and it's a reference I can go off of to get my dimension off of the laser, and you can see where I'm at here. Like I say, I've already got this squared up, so I can go front and then go to the rear. Make sure that's exactly the same reading, so I know I have this whole assembly. I've already checked the Heights has got a flat surface on the front of the spindle. Let me see if I can get a light here on this. It makes it real easy to check the caster. You can go just use this straight edge and you check the caster, and then it's a simple matter of putting a level or whatever you want to use. A level works fine. Just make sure that you've got the the rotor straight up and down, angle finder or level, either one. What I do, I just run pretty much 0 on the camber, and then the casters, I run it about 5 degrees. So if you've got this side fixed, referenced, and everything square, it's just a matter of taking the measurements to that side, doing pretty much the same things on the other side that you did on this side, and then you can reference the toe end off this side because you know it's square. So we're going to get into that and see how this goes. Okay, so I thought I'd just give you a shot of some of the results of what happened here. That is I think Jake's already put up pictures of this, but that is the right side upper control arm. You can see that it's bent here and here. It bent this mounting rod, and it also pushed the whole assembly forward, bent here. That's what happened when the caliper wedged between the rotor and the wheel. Now we've got the new one that we got from Heights, which they had in stock, and they were real good about getting it to us quick. That's what we're going to put on first, and then we'll just continue on and see if we can get this thing lined up and put back together. This is the stiff knees that we made. This is what makes it much simpler and much more accurate to line these front ends up. This just takes the place of the shock as a hard stop. It pulls the lower control arm up to the position you want it, which is like I say, Heights wants those lower control arms running level, and that puts the suspension travel right. So if you get the lower control arm right, you can take the straight edge, go along the bottom of the caliper, and on this particular truck, you can run a tape measure from one side to the other to check the toe in. So this really simplifies front end alignment on these things. It puts things, then all you have to do is just make sure you get the spring cut to the right length so that it puts the lower control arm back level just like this thing does. So that's just wanted to let you know about that. We got everything put back together, put the new upper control arm on. I've still got the stiff knee in. We squared everything off the other side. That side is running absolutely square with the rear end. So we were able to, by using these angles, this is like an extruded aluminum angle. They're very square, very straight. So I can measure off the bottom of this here and here with the tape measure on the other side, and I was actually, when I got everything back together, I was off about 3/16 of an inch on the toe. So I squared this side with the other side, got both of them running parallel, then put the toe in so much on each side. I actually ended up with about 3/16 total toe in, equal amounts on both sides. So we got everything back square. The upper control arms are tight, so I just have to drop the lower control arms back loose, put the springs and the shocks back in, and if I don't forget any more bolts, if I leave any more bolts loose, we should be good. So that's kind of how we go about that.
Well, I'm back. You guys have seen Mom and Dad working on this thing while I was gone. I just got in pretty late here, but got in all day of traveling. Back together, me and Dad took it down the road and drove it. No crazy shakes or bangs or booms or anything else falling off of it. So tomorrow, we are officially, Dad's gonna take this thing up and get the doors lettered. So we've been trying to kind of hold on to that surprise a little bit because I think it's going to be really cool. We've talked about this thing since the very beginning. This thing really, as soon as Dad got it, it was kind of the thought that this would be the kind of everyday crank it up and start it with the LS. It would be really easy to drive, everyday kind of shop truck. We know that's pretty common nowadays. Everybody's got a shop truck, right? But that was always the thought behind this thing. And the lettering that is going to get done to this thing is really going to kind of solidify that. One of Dad's really good friends is going to do it, and we're really excited. I think it's going to be really cool. When we get there, or when Dad gets there, I'll get him to take the video camera or whatever, and we'll get that figured out. But either way, we're going to show you, I want to show you each little step that this has went. Dad's had kind of been talking through text with him on how we wanted to do it. It went from a sketch on a napkin to an actual drawn up piece, and then what's going to actually go on the truck. So I'm going to show all of that as we go along, because that's going to be pretty cool to see that process, because I've never seen it done, and I'm really looking forward to it on this thing. So that's tomorrow, but so far back together, everything's good. I'm probably gonna probably tomorrow someone's probably gonna have to follow him up there just to make sure, just in case, since they don't need me having to run up there again like I did last time. So we'll figure that out, but we'll see you guys tomorrow when we get over here to get this thing lettered up. Well, we got this thing back, and it turned out just even better than we could have possibly expected. It looks so good. You guys will have got to see step by step kind of how it went and each piece that he did to it, and like I said, it's just even better than we could have expected. He went in and added this Marshall NC to the bottom of it and everything, and man, it's just, yeah, it's just perfect. Fits the truck really well, and got to hear some really cool stories about his life and things like that, and that was a lot of fun to hear all of that too. But I think we're going to call it good on this episode of Shift Points. We want to thank everyone for watching. Make sure to hit that subscribe button when it pops up in the center of the screen, and you can always follow us on Facebook and Instagram as we go along. We try and keep everybody up to date. That's usually a little bit ahead of the videos too. So if you want to keep up to date on what we got going on with this thing and everything else that we're working on, go ahead and give us a follow. Thanks for joining.